You are listening to the Enormocast.
Do you have an unreformed dirtbag in your life? One who lived in a truck for years, but now that they have a roof, their own internet password, and maybe even a 401k, they still pinch pennies like it's the crux hold of their 2-year project. Maybe they still boast a cracked travel mug that they found outside the shitter in Indian Creek, surveilling it for 2 days to make sure it was up for grabs before throwing it into their kit unwashed and unrepentant. Well, this holiday season, it's our sworn duty to get those skin-flinty friends something they secretly covet but would never buy of their own accord. That's where Yeti comes in. The simple gift-giving options of the Yeti Rambler stainless coffee mugs go from espresso to jug of joe, even, Lord Almighty, the dirtbag Holy Grail, the Rambler ceramic lined French press. Customize it with an Enormocast sticker and your former dumpster dweller will lose their goddamn mind. Or how about a Yeti Yonder water bottle to replace the PermaStink bottle they left in the haul bag for 5 months after coming home from the valley? So check out the plethora of gift ideas, many under $50 at Yeti.com, or go big and completely crush them with a new Tundra cooler. Your call, but you're probably still going to have to wrestle them for that busted up icebox they found on the side of I-70 6 winters ago. Just let it go, bud. It had a good run.
First came the Archaeopteryx, a compact feathered dinosaur who dared to fly, maybe. But at the very least, they dared to be different with their cute little feathers out there strutting around like primal chickens. Tip of the hat to those mighty but mini mavericks. Then, some 150 million years later, one of them half-pint bosses was dug up and its rebel attitude inspired the founding of Arc'teryx Equipment. These days, Arc'teryx is known for its own forward-thinking design instincts in apparel. But did you know that it all started with climbing harnesses? That's right. In 1989, the sport was a-changin', and clunky, uncomfortable harnesses were not gonna fly. 36 years later, Arc'teryx has refined their harness offerings to just 2 flawless designs, the Skaha and the AR395, which is a mouthful. Personally, I'd named it the Bugaboo. But I'm not in charge, am I? The Skaha excels in sport and short climbing, and the AR are all-round, boast blazonry for big roots and alpine. Both these sleek saddles come from the vapor harness lineage we all remember, where lightweight breathability does not compromise comfort and function. So check out them harnesses hiding amongst all that amazing apparel at Arc'teryx.com or your local shop. And fly off them roots with the same confidence that our little feathered dino friend took to the sky so long ago.
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000 seats? We really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by La Sportiva
Arc'teryx Equipment.
and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is December 18th, 2025, about 9 a.m. here in Colorado, and this is episode 317 of the Enormocast, a conversation with alpinist Alik Berg. And Alik is the alpine equivalent of a deep cut. Alik is a pretty undercover dude out of Canmore, Alberta. You got to be pretty into alpine climbing to know who Alik is. However, if you are into alpine climbing, then you know that this guy is universally respected by the people who know him and who climb with him. Referred to by Quentin Roberts as, quote, the secret weapon. And Quentin also said it's almost like cheating when you have Alik on your team. So that's the kind of guy we're talking to today. He does not have a high profile. He does not have much of a presence online. We get into that reluctance a little bit in the podcast and why he agreed to do it despite his penchant to shut up about his climbing. Ironically, one of the more high-profile things that happened to him in the last few years was that he was summarily erased from the Girishanka film at Real Rock. He was digitally poofed out of existence on the summit next to Josh Wharton. He had arrived there at the same time that Josh arrived, completing a route he was doing with Quentin Roberts. But that didn't fit the narrative very well, so boop, he was gone. We do mention the little controversy in the interview briefly. Anyhow, let's talk a little bit about 2025 for the Enormocast. The Enormocast birthday, which is December 11th, happened a few days ago. The Enormocast is 15 years old, which on paper makes the Enormocast a petulant teenager. But I think in podcast years, man, I feel like it's about 112. Yeah, the Enormocast is more like a wizened Greek goat herder that's been living on olives and nuts his whole life on some Greek island somewhere. That's the actual age of the Enormocast. Happy birthday to me and to the Enormocast, and thanks for joining me in this celebration. This will be the last show of 2025, so I want to talk a little bit about some statistics. First of all, I went hard back to face-to-face shows this year. Old fans will recall that I insisted on that for about 205 episodes, and then the technology and COVID and things all started making doing remote shows a much more viable option, and obviously it has its advantages, especially to talking to people overseas and to getting things done without insisting that someone sit down in front of me, which was a pain in the ass. And actually doing the sound live in a room is a lot harder than what's provided online these days. However, I still like the vibe. I hear from you guys that you like the vibe. So this year, I ended up doing 17 of the 21 episodes that I posted live, face-to-face, in the room or on the stage or wherever it happens to be. Which, again, it just started happening. I didn't actually make that big of effort to do it. It just fell into my lap. A lot of it was thanks to Arc'teryx getting me in front of people and just happenstance, really. And also a lot of guests wanted to do it that way. They felt like that would be a better way to have a connection of sitting face-to-face. So that was pretty cool, 17-4 on that. And then somewhere about halfway through the year, I realized that I was about 50-50 on platforming women to platforming men, which in climbing, especially kind of the age and type of shows that I do, usually it's a little lopsided or even very lopsided towards men. But this year I kind of started thinking, well, why don't I just go for it and try to go hard the other direction? And if you count everybody that sat there on the show, not including me, because I'm on every show and I'm a dude, the Enormocast platformed 14 women to 11 dudes. Is that important? Are we still doing the cultural warrior thing? I don't know. It was just something I thought I would try. I had actually tried it, I think 2 years ago and missed the mark by a little bit. The truth is I just get who I get. Not everybody's available. Not everybody wants to do it. So I've been criticized in the past around having climbers of color on and things like that. But, honestly, you just get what you get sometimes. And not everybody wants to do the show. I know it's hard to believe. So that was my mission last year. I'm going to still kind of keep it in mind. I don't think I'm necessarily going to rack myself over it this year. But keeping in mind a 50-50 split, I think is just a good idea from sort of a business and listener standpoint. Keep sending me your ideas. Men, women, different colors, different backgrounds, different orientations. They just have to have an interesting climbing story and a willingness and maybe a little talent around telling it. It's always nice. Hey, I want you to have this dude on that never wants to talk about his climbing. Oh, okay. That doesn't sound like he really wants to do it, but yeah, I'll give it a try. That's where Alik Berg comes in. Alik is not the kind of dude that wants to talk about his climbing, but he's making an effort. And he explains that in this podcast as to what he's up to there. I did get a suggestion to talk to Alik a couple years ago and hit him up, and he said yes, but he also said he would like to do it face-to-face, and that is tricky. So it just kept getting put off. We kept missing each other, and, a little bit of his actual instinctual reluctance, I think, was at play there. But then I finally cornered him at Banff this year. So also we can thank the Banff Mountain Film Festival for getting this one done. He had nowhere to go. I literally put him in a corner. Literally, he's sitting in a corner in my hotel room doing this. And he does an amazing job. Actually, I love this podcast. It was a challenge for me. All the ones I did in Banff had their challenges, but I think it turned out great. And he fully warmed up to it. And the thing is he's a super, super sweet dude. And so once he sat down, he really made an effort to make it work. And I can point to some of my shows that I feel like the person did not make an effort. You guys can feel it too and have let me know. All right, good faith effort here from a guy born and raised in Edmonton, lives in Canmore, full Canadian. That's another thing. I had a lot of Canadians on this year. Canada. I know the U.S. hasn't been treating you so sweet this year, but I'm here for you, Canada. Let's get to it, a conversation with alpinist Alik Berg. Oh, but wait. It's December, and you longtime listeners know what that means. It's time for one from the archives. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. From Sportiva and the Enormocast.
Hey, Bobby, you going ice climbing this winter? Well, all right. Why don't we tell them how to keep their toes warm up on those icicles? Yeah, swing them tools, baby. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but in the gym it's quite delightful. But you don't want to know, so ice climbing you will go. But the crummy boots you've chosen will keep your poor toes frozen. Pain builds character, so ice climbing you will go. With Sportiva boots fit right, you love going out in the storm. Even when you grip too tight, up the icicle you'll be warm. Under the boards the bros are spraying, but indoors you'll not be staying. Let Sportiva take care of your toes, so ice climbing you can go. Remember this winter, that frozen feet, losing your toenails, and bashing your front points around like a drunken Cossack dancer is not just, quote, part of ice climbing. Do it better, warmer, and with pleasure in exceptional ice climbing and mountain boots from Sportiva. All right, Bobby, let's take him to the moon. 2, 3, instead of loudly whining, or with the bar fees you start crying, be a boss up on the flows with Sportiva around your toes. Cha-cha. Hey, Bobby, why don't we sled on over to Sportiva.com or our favorite local shop and check out them boots.
So I'm going to open with a Oprah-ish question. Tell me about your father.
Well, so my dad was born in Germany, immigrated in, I think, 49. Like, he was born in, like, the dying days of World War II in East Germany. And then, like, kind of, like, came as a refugee or whatever with his family. So I think he was 5 when he came to Canada. And, like, his family was pretty into kind of, like, going on Canadian adventures and, like, driving out to the mountains, and which in the 50s, I think, was actually pretty, like, going camping in the Rockies was kind of hardcore. But so he kind of, like, got exposure to the mountains, scrambled up some with his brothers, and then, like, I guess got into more formal climbing through the Alpine Club. I think he kind of really got into climbing in college, went to school in San Diego and studied music, but, like, started climbing at, like, Talkeets and Woodson and stuff, and going to Yosemite and stuff. That was sort of his background in climbing. But then he stayed in Edmonton and, like, raised family there, and kind of, like, stopped climbing initially when he had kids, but kind of, like, got me and my sister into it as soon as he could. My sister didn't take to it as much, but yeah, we were like out top roping, like when I was like 3, I think.
And this is like up in Edmonton.
Around here.
Okay.
Like my first roped climbs are actually like, you can like, see them from this, not away from this window. But
okay.
Like in the, the Banff golf course, there's like a rock.
Oh yeah.
Like a boulder called Rundle Rock. That was like my first top roping.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Right here.
Yeah.
So this guy, and tell us his name because it's awesome. Reinhard Berg. Yeah. It sounds like a mountaineer. It's like, it's pretty sick. Yeah. So he gets you into it, but you guys went, I mean, you were top roping as a little kid, but seems like it wasn't long before like you were leading or climbing big stuff. I mean, what was like the evolution to that? Because I read some little tale about a 10-year-old ascent of the Grand Wall.
Yeah, I guess there's a few steps between Rundle Rock and that, but
only a few years.
Yeah, but you learn a lot when you're, 9 or whatever. You learn a lot. You learn fast. I mean, I think actually the first multi-pitch we did together was also on Rundle, like on the west end of Rundle above the golf course there. I don't know what that would have been like. Maybe I was 5 or something, 6, something like that. And these early climbs were all with my sister too. So we were like, she's 2 years older than me. So we would go on these multi-pitch adventures, and, my sister would belay because she's the older, but she's like 7 or whatever. and I would back her up. I would hold the brake strand. So it was like totally safe.
No weight differentiation, I'm sure, between your dad and your sister.
He was soloing, right? Like he knew it. But yeah, no, we did like, we'd come like do family road trips and like do a few days of climbing, like, on Rundle or on Yam, or, the Apron and Squamish, stuff like that. The first time we climbed a route on Yam together, the 3 of us, we got benighted on the Calgary route, like a pitch from the top, and had like no bivy gear, probably no headlamps, like total adventure. And like my mom was in the like camping in the meadows in the parking lot, and we just didn't come back that night. Like no cell phones, right? So it was like, I think there was other people. It was like back in those days, it was like the climbers campground. Right. And so there was like other climbers in the meadows, that were like kind of trying to tell her it was going to be okay. And like, they were probably fine. Like people get benighted up there all the time, which is like total bullshit. Right. But I'm sure they were super worried, but anyways, whatever. It worked out.
Clearly. Yeah. That's amazing. Like, forced bivy on Yam. So Yam, I mean, it's not like it's roadside, but I think it's a pretty committing wall, by modern standards. And the thing that I've pointed out on here before is that like right now we live in this era where like it's unusual that a good climber who's like right now, let's say 20 years old or 25 years old, didn't start climbing as a kid. Obviously because of gyms. But 30 years ago, which is roughly, you're 37, so this is roughly 30 years ago, that was super unusual to see kids out climbing. And I think probably up here in the Rockies, like it would be really unusual to see a lot of kids out climbing, especially multi-pitch stuff.
There was a few other kids out and about for sure. Yeah. Like it was also like a time where like parenting was a bit different, and like taking risk with kids was sort of more acceptable. Like not that level of risk. That was probably,
I was going to say.
That was probably unacceptable, but it was like more normal for like parents to take their, let's say, 10-year-old kids multi-pitch climbing. Like that wouldn't be that weird. Or just climbing outside. I feel like today, well, yeah, it happens, but it's like less socially acceptable.
Yeah, for sure. The authorities would be waiting in the parking lot after that Yam thing.
Totally.
To take you away. So I read a little thing from a person who would much later, I think, become something of a mentor and a friend, Ian Wellstead, meeting you, this thing I mentioned earlier in Squamish, after either having just done or about to do an ascent of the Grand Wall at 10. Yeah. And no longer following.
I think it was 12.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll have to correct the record then. on Ian's blog. But either way, a little
10
kid.
sounds better.
Yeah, it's a more 12 is a good number though too. But so tell me about that. I mean, now you're leading and taking falls apparently, and talk a little bit about that one. Then we'll and meeting Ian. Obviously, you probably didn't know who you were meeting.
I don't actually
at that
remember
time.
meeting Ian, but he remembers, and I believe him.
Okay.
I think probably a more unique, memorable meeting for Ian, meeting like the 12-year-old.
Yeah,
than for me just meeting some other climber, because I was meeting all kinds of climbers.
Yeah.
And that was super
just
cool.
another adult.
But but it was also like, I mean, that was a period of time where I was starting to like meet other climbers out road tripping and like climbing with other people. And so that was, but since I never went climbing with Ian, it was just like someone I met in the parking lot. It didn't stick. Anyways, I guess that was sort of a period where I started leading more, or maybe leading the cruxes. Like I was still climbing primarily with my dad, but I'd be like leading the hard pitches more. So the first time on the ground, we climbed it together, and I think I probably led the whole thing. I don't think I freed everything. I think I was like, took a few times on the sword or whatever. One of the easy exit pitches I took on a piece and popped the piece and ripped whatever other gear was in the pitch, which I think was one other piece. Anyways, factor 2'd onto the anchor, and which was like the belay was like a tree belay on a big ledge.
Right.
So it was like somehow I managed to bounce off the ledge without damaging myself too much. But my dad was belaying, with like a slack tether to this tree. So like when I fell past the ledge, I yanked him down and slammed his leg into the edge of the ledge. So he was a bit more damaged, but still kind of okay. But so we had this kind of epic bail, like it was the end of a traverse pitch, so I had to reverse and then like wrapping down in the dark and stuff. It was all good. He just like had this massive bruise in his leg and stuff. No broken bones.
What was like his reaction to something like that? Do you guys have a debrief? Does he like, I mean, I just can't even imagine like watching my kid rip 2 pieces and go zinging past me on a factor 2 fall. Like, did it freak him out, or was it just like staunch, like, this is the things that happen in the mountains, son, let's learn from it? I
mean, you'd have to ask him.
Well, he's here now.
But no, I think, he's pretty like calm under pressure, and it was sort of like a semi-serious situation that obviously required not freaking out. It was fine.
More like in the moment versus later, of just having like this epic to tell. Because I mean, even then, I think like you could tell that story, and a bunch of other climbers would be like, what the fuck? Like, your kid took a factor 2 fall and ripped pieces. Like, what are you guys doing? So, yeah. I don't know. Anyway, it seems kind of casual, and maybe that's just in retrospect.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that casual for sure. But like, the injuries were minor. Like, right. I bounced off this ledge, and I wasn't wearing a helmet too. It was like, whatever. Now I wear a helmet all the time. Like, I wear a helmet sport climbing now, but but at the time it was like, oh, like nobody wears a helmet in Squamish.
Dude, your dad's going to jail. We're getting a lot of stuff out of this.
Yeah, you should probably edit that out. But no, I like somehow bounced off this ledge, like inverted, like off, like rolled off my head and shoulder. Huh. I don't know. It's like super lucky. I think you're just when you're a kid, you just like you bounce nicely. Right?
Yes, yeah, totally. All right, well let's move on to some other stuff. We're kind of doing this a little chronologically, but we can quit that in a minute. But the other legend is that you started doing these big road trips to Yosemite as a kid. Still, I mean, and I would say road trip is. I'm interested in how you'd get there because I read like climbing El Cap when you were 15 and things like that, which obviously is pre-driver's license. So tell me a little bit about this 12-year-old kid. He's climbing with his dad, and then it seems like some of this is now you setting out on your own.
Yeah, so like there was sort of like a series of summers, I guess probably in middle school, where I was doing a road trip with my dad every summer, and in Canada, Squamish, the Bow Valley, maybe we went to Smith Rock once when it was raining or something. And then I think maybe the summer before the first year of high school, we went to the valley. This still went down with my dad, but would have been 15 and was like getting to be more interested in climbing with other people. It was like a teenager and just was like, still got along with my dad, but just normal teenager shit, right? So was so we traveled down together that summer, and I think maybe the summer after, but I like climbed less and less with him, and like really like jumped into the Camp 4 kind of dirtbag scene or whatever, and got really into big wall climbing. Was sort of doing that in Squamish before, like did a bit of like climbed University Wall or whatever, did some single pitch aid stuff. So got to Yosemite that first summer, like, you know, newbie aid climber, but like really wanting to climb El Cap. And I think I soloed Leaning Tower first, and then with just like a bunch of junk gear, which is a whole other story, but somehow figured that out, you know, and then climbed. I think I was going to solo the Muir Wall, and then just ended up with a partner, just like met someone who was like also going to solo a wall, and was like, whoa, you were going to solo El Cap? I was going to solo El Cap. We could do it together. That'd be easier. You know? So yeah, met this guy Jacques from Luxembourg and climbed Salathe, and then he was just there on a short trip. So I think that summer we did one more. But yeah, that summer also I climbed New Dawn with Scotty Vinchik, who became close friend. I don't know if did you know Scotty from Yosemite, or
no?
That's kind of maybe after what years were you climbing Yosemite?
In the 90s.
Okay,
so
yeah,
mid-90s.
So I was sort of like 5 years later.
Yeah. Sounds like you were like, yeah.
This would have been like 2003.
Right.
So yeah, sort of almost a generation later. The generations are short there.
Yeah.
The fires burn bright, and yeah, not very long. But yeah, spent 3 summers living in Camp 4, and like did a lot of growing up there, right? Like, you know, figured out what I wanted from life in a certain way that like has still stuck, where it was, you know, living around all these people who were just living and breathing climbing, and nothing else mattered. And it was just awesome, right? Like, you know, money, career, whatever normal trappings of life were just like totally absent. And, you know, all these people here, like living in the dirt, they had all figured that out. And I was kind of like 15 years old and being like, oh yeah, this is the way. So yeah, met a lot of people that I think really shaped the rest of my life and values, and yeah.
So your dad was kind of there.
Yeah, on the periphery.
Yeah,
he was the taxi driver.
Right. Like every summer, did you spend time like totally by yourself down there?
Oh yeah. I mean, even before that in Squamish, he would like drop me off at the river, and I would just sort of climb with like random Americans or whatever for a week or two. But in the valley, I think the first season we climbed together a fair bit, and then the second season I had some of his climbing partners, I had some of mine. We made sort of our own plans, but drove down together. And I think the third season he didn't go at all. I think I just took the bus down.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was 30 years, well, more like 20, 25 years ago, but I still, and you're being very casual about it. I think that's your way. But yeah, I mean, just even then, like I'm older than you are. And this idea that my parents would have just been like, oh, sure, we'll see you in a couple weeks, or you're on your own. Here's some money, put it in your pocket. Like, I don't know. It seems like a pretty big leap for, what was your dad like that he was okay with this? I mean, what was your relationship like?
I think he was pretty trusting. I mean, he kind of knew my demeanor, right? Like, and like, to be fair, it wasn't like totally leaving the kid alone, right?
Right.
Like even like in the, you know, at the river in Squamish, it was like by the time he was leaving to go do whatever he needed to do, we knew a bunch of people there, right? So he knew I was sort of like in the hands of the community there, so to speak, right? And it's like, yeah, it's like the loose dirtbag community, but there was people looking out for me. It was like 14 or whatever, right? So it's like old enough to kind of be able to like manage my own shit, cook for myself or whatever, and like not do anything totally stupid. But if something had gone wrong, I did have the community there,
sure,
looking out for me,
right?
But yeah, no, it's definitely like it wouldn't fly today.
Yeah, I mean, but
it's probably weird back then too.
What do you think about it? Like now that you don't have kids, but you're in your late 30s and looking back on that moment. I mean, I still think it was pretty special. I mean, do you sort of revere it? Do you?
I think I was super fortunate, yeah, to have, because even then, I think like most parents would be uncomfortable with that.
No, if I'd have said even previous to that, when maybe things were even looser to my mom, I'm like, I'm going to this place for a couple months, see you later. She'd have been like, shut the fuck up, go clean your room, like,
but it's not,
you think you are, but
it's not unprecedented, right? It's like,
right.
There's like stories of, I don't know if you know Hamish Fraser, like Squamish hardcore, climbed a lot with Peter Croft. Peter Croft was sort of the famous one, and Hamish was the quiet one. Like they freed University Wall together and stuff. But Hamish, there's a story of him like going to solo the University Wall in Squamish as an aid route. And I think he was 14, and like hitchhiking down the road with the haul bag to go solo wall in like 70s Squamish, right? Like a very different town than it is today, right? I guess that was the 70s, and then it was different.
I don't know. We could move on from that, but it's just, I think it's pretty fascinating because, and there's kind of different ways that happens, where there's like someone who's from a place where, their parents don't even know what they're up to, or don't care, or, whatever your home situation is. But it's cool that you happen to have this dad who was very active in it and knew the community well enough to be like, yeah, he'll be okay.
There's like a lot of faith in the community for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that was justified. Like the community was super tight back then, right? I mean, it still is in places, obviously, but like, just thinking about the sort of dirtbag community in Squamish in the 90s, it was small, right? It was like less than 100 people or something, right?
Right.
So if you spent the summer there, you did kind of know everyone, and you knew who you could count on, and who was kind of flaky, and who, whatever, right? Like, and people did look out for each other. It's just bigger now, right? And it's kind of like a little more dispersed. It's like everyone's in a van somewhere. You meet people at the crag, but it's not that, there's not that central hangout spot. And Camp 4 is the same, right? It's like everyone's like at the cafe in the morning. So you kind of like get to know everyone that's like there for the season, and that community becomes pretty small and tight. It's probably the same now, but
talk to some of your partners to try to get some background for this, because you're a bit of an enigma in terms of internet and things like that. It's part of who you are, I think, as a climber, which we can talk about. But Quentin Roberts was somebody I talked to a bunch of for some information, and one of the things he mentioned about this, like these years in Yosemite, is he called it sort of like that you'd gotten this very American experience in the sense of climbing wise. And, Yosemite's very specific. It's a very kind of, there's nowhere else like it. The community, the type of climbing, the big walls that are like roadside. I mean, all these sorts of things that go into the weather, all these things that make Yosemite. Yosemite is not Alberta, it's not the Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
But he said that bringing that back here is a big foundation of who you became as a alpine climber.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that? And what do you think you take from that experience that makes maybe that basis unique or a little bit different than just having grown up climbing here in the Rockies?
Well, yeah, like the years in Yosemite, like those first few seasons, especially in high school, they're just like formative years of, any person's life, right? But especially for me, like, I did a lot of growing up there. And I think I was probably quite influenced by the people there, the style, the people I looked up to there. So yeah, I think you're right. There's probably something there that I carried up here that's a bit different than a normal upbringing in the Rockies. But it's a combination, right? Like, this is like, even outside of that, I was traveling all over Western Canada in those years too. And I did a ton of climbing in the Rockies as well in those early years. So I didn't move to Canmore until 2012, but by then I'd been climbing in the Rockies for almost 20 years, right? But kind of as a visitor, as a weekend warrior or whatever. But the sort of the Rocky style, the loose rock, all that stuff was already familiar. But yeah, the climbing culture in Yosemite, I think for sure that stuck with me a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a running thing with me, is talking about how a lot of times a climbing scene, and Yosemite's included in this. Actually, this is one of my prime examples often, is that it needs like outside influences to move it,
to
get things done. And I point out that the Hubers were the ones that came in and like, hey, we can free climb up here.
Yep.
And not that anybody was saying you couldn't, but they
showed a different way to do it.
Yeah.
And it worked.
And it's interesting when I started talking to people about that part of your life, I was like, well, he was kind of this homeboy, but you know, he had this other vision maybe that had been implanted in him. And, you know, my running joke about me being here in Canmore, you know, whether I'm still a legend here or not, we didn't open with that. I usually do. I knew your answer already, which is yes. But that was actually literally like, not to like toot my horn, but that was the thing that I came up here and I, you know, went into this place, the Ghost River. And I'm like, why aren't routes going up these, like where the good rock is? You guys keep climbing in these gullies and cracks and things where the bad rock is. Why aren't you out here? And it's, we don't really bolt, or people aren't that interested in that place or whatever. And not that I changed anything. That's the difference about this analogy.
I mean, people still don't want to leave the crag now.
Yeah, no one cares.
Even if there's bolts.
But it was like, I was like, well, okay, well then I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And you know, it had some influence for a short time, but we talked about how no one climbs in there still. But yeah, just this idea that you're like, well, wait, why not? And people, well, because that's not how we do things. And so, I mean, you know, coming to Canmore, obviously you were drawn back here because it's the, like, you know, it's the seat of kind of Rockies climbing. But tell me about that decision to, you know, center yourself here in the Rockies as opposed to keep going to Yosemite or finding yourself, you know, you were primarily a rock climber, it sounds like, and you made some changes. Tell me about that evolution to alpine climbing and being here.
Yeah, there's sort of like an era of my life from like, you know, the high school years to like the first few years out of high school where everything was centered around Yosemite. Well, everything was centered around El Cap, right? So it would be like a trip to Yosemite, climb as many El Cap routes as possible, and then like go back to Edmonton, well, go to school or go to work, depending, right? And then like repeat the cycle. And then like after high school, I was going on, you know, going to Yosemite, but also going all over the Southwest road tripping and stuff. And somewhere in that period, I think I was like maybe 21 or so, I got quite bad tendonitis in my wrist, and it prevented me from properly rock climbing for like almost 2 years. And so that was kind of like a bit of a transitional period, right? Where didn't really know what to do, like needed to figure out a new direction, you know, didn't know if I would ever climb again, like all this kind of shit. You know, thought about going back to school. Oh, the horror, you know, luckily avoided that. And the wrists did start to get better. And like, so was working in a climbing shop at that time, just kind of like not going anywhere. And I was starting to get into skiing and doing some stuff in the Rockies, like in Edmonton. So I was like living in Edmonton and was doing trips to the Rockies. And like, I'd always been kind of interested in alpine climbing and winter climbing, but never really done it. And while I worked in that shop living in Edmonton, I was starting to dabble in it a little bit. And the wrist started getting better. And it kind of was obvious I needed to leave Edmonton. And around that time, I did my first IRATA course, like rope access training, and sort of just like started this new phase, you know, where I started the new career, if you want to call it that, in rope access, and bought a car, drove all my shit to Canmore, got a place, and was just like, I'm going to try this for a while. And I don't think that the goal necessarily was to get into alpinism, but it was to like live somewhere like in a climbing town in Canada and like build a community there. I think that was sort of more the goal at that time. Cause for the years before that, where I was going to Yosemite and road tripping and stuff, I definitely I was sort of like, didn't have a community in Edmonton, had family in Edmonton, but I wasn't, other than the family, I wasn't really connected to the place. And all my friends were in Yosemite, right? Like all my climbing friends, my close personal connections, like they were all in Yosemite or in the States. Because it's so transient and everyone's moving around, I didn't have that sort of like, I didn't have that place of community, I guess, right? Like it was sort of clear to me that Yosemite would never be that place because I was never going to live there, right? I'd always be a visitor. And then the people that were part of that community are all transient too. So they're all constantly cycling in and out. And so I kind of made a conscious effort to just like give Canmore a try, right? Like try living there and see if I can build a community there. Well, and yeah, still there. So I guess it worked.
Yeah, I guess it worked. No, I mean, you're, again, from sort of talking to folks who know you and climb with you, and you're a very integral part of that community, actually. So you've been there a long time. I mean, 2012, so over a decade. Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you talk that. I still have this like idea of this kind of insider outsider thing that you hadn't. I mean, even saying that you're this Canadian Rockies climber who, you know, hadn't really gotten into sort of ice and snow, you know, that's like usually the opposite.
Yeah.
And then
part of it was my dad wasn't into it.
Oh, okay.
Right. So like the early days climbing with my dad, like he never got into ice climbing. He was into climbing mountains, alpine climbing, like climbing the bugs and stuff like that.
Right.
But but he never ice climbed.
Right.
So I just didn't have exposure to it until like after high school, basically. Mm-hmm. And like high school years, I was just going to Yosemite, and that was the focus, right?
Yeah.
So it did take like sort of a deliberate effort. At some point in there, I was just like, well, I got to go try and figure this out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you have to. Like, you live in Canmore now. Like, you almost literally have to. I mean, I talked to Sarah Hunikin here last year, and she arrived in more or less in Canmore as a rock climber as well. Yeah. And said, well, yeah, but that gets you through, you know, 2 good months with some shoulder.
Yeah, it's a terrible place to live as a rock climber for sure.
So yeah, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about the first kind of forays. I have Snowpatch written down here, an ascent on Snowpatch that Quentin said that was something that was interesting. I don't know if that was early on or later.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah, let's hear it.
That's like, that goes back a little bit. That's like I think that was the summer between grade 11 and 12.
Okay.
So it was like, you know, peak Yosemite and big wall enthusiasm. And that summer, I only spent half the summer in the valley, and then the second half, or like the last 3 weeks or whatever of August, went to the bugs to, you know, like climb a new big wall, right? And I don't know, do you remember a guy named Jake Hector?
No.
Like he's still around. I don't think he climbs anymore, but he was like super keen hard aid climber, and you know, like 2004, 5, 6 kind of. He had an internet moniker that I'm trying to remember. Bring Me Death. Do you remember Bring Me Death?
No.
Okay.
But it seems to
from the somehow, Super Topo days.
It seems to somehow play into my aid rant somewhere. So
yeah. Anyways, he was a character. Awesome dude. And like, so I guess I would have been 17 and he was 18. Like he had just graduated high school. I can't remember if we even climbed anything in the valley, but we hung out a bunch that summer anyways, and hatched this plan to go to the bugs and climb a new route. I think we wanted to climb on North Hauser, but then we got there and realized how far that was from the parking. So we went to the south face of Snowpatch instead, which is sunny. That seemed nice and closer to the road.
All characteristics of big walling in Yosemite.
Yeah, exactly. We were like totally unprepared for like, you know, alpine big wall climbing. Right. Like we were straight, like we were just like approach shoes and like haul bags and total El Cap style. But whatever, we hauled all this shit up there and scoped a line and fixed some ropes and packed like 2 weeks of crap and started up. And immediately got pounded by shit weather, like got major storms and like I think we like, you know, we brought like a ton of alcohol and whatever other illicit substances, you know, like
so
my
you
partner
just fully like transplanted the Yosemite thing to the bugs.
Yeah. And my partner had just turned 18. So he like drove into Alberta so that he could buy all the booze. And then we drove back to BC. So anyways, I think we spent 14 days on it or something, like a long time. And basically we were up there long enough that the season ended, you know, like there's always kind of a season ending storm in September.
You lived through it.
Where like it snows and then it's like, oh, the rock climbing season's over and everyone leaves. But, you know, we were like on pitch 9 or whatever. So we just carried on. But the funny part of this was, basically it took way longer than expected. And again, this is like before cell phones or, well, InReaches obviously and all that stuff. So I just like didn't show up for my first day of high school because I was on like, you know, pitch 12 or something in the storm. And like my poor parents like were just like, oh, he's in the bugs. He's probably okay. And they ended up actually like calling, like they didn't call like a rescue per se, but they kind of called the ACC who runs the hut.
Right.
And they got in touch with the hut custodian and they kind of relayed the message. Oh yeah, there's some guys on Snowpatch. Well, we'll go check on them, you know. And so somebody like walked out and checked and was like, yeah,
glassed you guys.
Yeah, they're still moving.
They're still up there.
You know? But yeah, so we spent however long, 2 weeks or something on this wall, finished the route. You know? Nice. Got it done and like got back like a week late for the first year or first semester of grade 12. Got kicked out of a bunch of classes because I didn't show up. Had a really light course load for that semester.
Right. You're just like, I can only imagine. I mean, you're sitting in this class with a bunch of normies from Edmonton and you're just like, got your faraway stare that you just went through this like full on epic.
Yeah.
And it's like, what did you do this summer?
Oh yeah.
I partied a lot and drove my car to the dam. And
I mean, I partied a lot too, to be fair, but yeah, in a different fashion.
Right. That's amazing.
But yeah, it's definitely like, I mean, it's hard to go back to like go to high school and everyone's like, oh, where are you going to university? Like, what are you going to study? You know? And I'm just like, oh God, I'm going to Yosemite, right? Like, I have no idea, which for better or for worse, right? At the very least, I knew what I wanted, right? Like if the goal in life is to get a good career and make lots of money or something, then I was like totally off the rails and I failed at that. But, I mean, who at 17 knows what they want to do? You know, like who at 17 knows like what they want their career to be, and then everyone goes to university and studies something. You know, it works for some people, but you know, at least I didn't like spend 4 years getting a useless diploma or degree.
Right. All right. Well, let's cut. That was a tangent. I didn't realize that had happened so early.
There will be more of those.
But yeah, totally. I mean, it's great. That's a great story. And it's just so. Because I always like to, when I talk to guys like you who got started so early, and like I said, we're not talking about like, oh, I was on the climbing team at the gym. Like you were well in it on a multi-pitch new route. I'm sure that's seen a ton of repeats in the Bugaboos.
This lineups,
yeah. That's so outrageous, man. It's so outrageous, actually.
I don't think the anchors would meet modern standards.
Right. Yeah, it's fine. And I, you know, like your personality is to be like, yeah, you know, it's what we did, but it's absolutely outrageous. So let's cut back to this Canmore thing. You drop in, you're interested in this community, and it seems like you connected very quickly. How did that happen in terms of like, you know, we don't usually mind going climbing, especially sport climbing, with someone that's new or that we don't know that well, or like, oh yeah, he seems like an all right guy. But to go up and start doing big alpine routes is, you know, there's some crazy people that are like, whatever, fine, dude, you got a pair of ice axes, let's go. But most people want to vet their partners. So how did you enter into that community of starting to do some of these things?
So it was a slower progression than that, right?
Yeah.
Because like when I moved to Canmore, I was probably like, you know, sketchily leading WI3, right? Like I was not an ice climber at all. Yeah. The first 2 winters, I think, were like, you know, still had my training wheels on kind of. Like I was learning how to climb in crampons, learning how to climb ice, eventually learning how to like climb rock in crampons and do all that. Like that was all like I was a total beginner in those years. So, but I climbed a lot, and I had a few friends in Calgary. I had like a close friend, Fred McGinnis, that I climbed a ton with in those years. He actually lives in Colorado now. But yeah, so there was sort of a period of time there where I climbed a ton with Fred, and like we both kind of developed as climbers and like started, you know, stepping out onto alpine routes. Like we had pretty similar skill set. He was like a better ice climber initially. He taught me a ton. So I had this kind of, network of climbing partners that got the ice climbing mileage with and started climbing more summer alpine routes first, I guess, right? Since the rock climbing was already kind of fine. It was just learning the nuances of, you know, like Rockies alpine. But I think like maybe after 2 years or so in Canmore, I went to Patagonia for the first time with Fred. And that would have been like the first kind of like, you know, eye-opening, like, oh, I have a lot to learn about alpine climbing kind of experience. Like we went there anticipating sunny rock climbing like the bugaboos, I think like most people do. And with, you know, like basic ice climbing skills, but not really like, not winter alpine skills. And then of course the weather was shit and we were just climbing on tools the whole time. So we learned a lot.
I think most people don't expect that actually, Alec. When they go to Patagonia, they don't. I don't think they do expect sunny.
I don't know. I think there's like there's a lot of but there's
I know
a lot
that
of
it exists.
There's a large cohort of people like that like, I mean, not fully expecting,
right? But
it's sort of like all of the pictures of the rock climbing routes are all in like these beautiful high pressure systems, and it's like people climbing in t-shirts and blue skies,
right? And
like the winds are howling, but you can't tell because it's a photo, right? And it looks like kind of like the High Sierra, right? With the glacier,
right?
And I mean, it can be during high pressure, right? Like, kind of is, but anyways, we didn't have that, so learned a lot there. I don't know. It's just like spent years slowly building up the skills, meeting new people, and then eventually kind of like, after a few seasons, started to kind of meet people like Ian and Raf and the, you know, the like the people that became more mentors in the alpine climbing world and in the Rockies. But yeah, I guess it was fairly quick now that I think about it, because 3 years and then I was climbing like, I think we climbed the Greenwood Lock in winter in 2015. So I guess that is only 3 years. That seems quick. But it seemed like a slow progression at the time.
Right. Well, that's the power of youth. It's never enough, right?
Yeah.
It's never fast enough, but at the same time, you know, one of the things that kept coming up and sort of reading about you and you know, I was reading Ian's some blog posts and things like that where you get mentioned. You know, they talk about volume. They talk about and also that you were sort of willing to go through a progression and maybe, you know, not totally leap ahead, but like you've in like kind of an old school attitude in a little bit, maybe instilled by your dad of like, yeah, you gotta learn your way through these things. I mean, do you have a comment on that in terms of your progression and your personality?
There is definitely like a deliberate effort to like build on skills that you have slowly and sort of like build the pyramid to the point where you have the skill set needed to like get up these things and, you know, with some level of safety. Like it was, I think I had enough maturity at that point to see that it's like pretty easy for the mountains to kill you if you let them. But yeah, I think part of it too, for like, as far as like, you know, progressing maybe quickly or whatever, is part of it is just being pretty young then and like being able to climb a ton, right? Basically, I didn't work at all in the winters in those years. I just climbed, and like back then, like I would climb 3 days in a row of winter climbing. Like now I do a day of winter climbing. I take at least one rest day after, usually two, right? For just a normal day at the Stanley Headwall or whatever, right? And like back then, I'd do back-to-back headwall days and stuff like that. So the volume was just massive compared to what it would be for like an older version of me.
Right.
Right. I mean, I wasn't that young, but I guess mid-20s. So young enough that I didn't need rest days.
So I watched Martin Van Heeren's slideshow last night. We're at the Banff Mountain Film Festival. And so there's all these opportunities to get slideshows and things from these locals that I mean, I don't have a lot of knowledge about. He's a frequent partner of yours. Mm-hmm. Seems to have also a little bit of a, maybe I wouldn't say conservative, but you know, he understands his limits a little bit, even though he pushes it pretty hard. I also noticed during that, like Ian was the moderator, the host. And then of course he's, you know, always throwing out these Barry Blanchard jokes like, yeah, here's this one climb, but look across at this other mountain. That's where Barry did this. And everybody chuckles. And that's where Barry did this. And then that's like the generation above Ian. And then Ian was sort of in his footsteps. And it feels like than, maybe you and your cohort. What did it mean to you to start climbing with some of these guys that were probably someone you knew about? And what was your interest in those generations that had come before you? A lot of young climbers can have the I don't really know anything about it. I don't care. This person's name's on this thing, or
it was super valuable. Yeah. It was super valuable to be able to climb with those guys in those early years of winter alpine climbing in the Rockies, because it's such a nuanced, complicated activity that you can't just sort of get strong and get good at it, right? Like you could with some types of climbing. There's a certain amount of wisdom or knowledge that you can only get through mileage, and then from the elders, so to speak, right? So, and it's kind of endless, right? There's no limit to the amount that you can continue to learn about how to move in those mountains somewhat safely. And so having those elders, or is Ian an elder now? No,
hell yeah.
Not quite.
Come on.
But, mentors, right? That have that extra decade of experience or whatever.
Right.
Super valuable. And I try to make the effort now as well to sort of try and pass a bit of that along too, right? But I think in those first few seasons in Canmore, it meant a lot also just to be able to climb with those guys, because I grew up I grew up reading, Canadian Alpine journals. That was my Instagram or whatever, right? And it was all that was their generation, right? That was when, I'm thinking late 90s, early 2000s. That was when modern mixed climbing was taking off, right? And so that is Raf and Ian's generation, right? So I was reading all this stuff about those guys climbing on Kefren and House Peak and whatever, and these big winter rigs, so they were sort of heroes of a sort in those years. So then to be able to move out here and then just call them up and go climbing pretty quickly, right? That's just, that's the beauty of climbing, right? The community's small, and your heroes, or whatever, are they kind of live next door. They're very accessible, right? It's not the same if you're whatever, a hockey fan or something, right?
Yeah, but the other thing that goes into that, and also myself having been around a long time and sort of lived that a little bit as well, is that it's this stamp of approval. Because every older generation, they look at the guys coming up, and they kind of judge okay, that guy, I don't know if he's on the right path. This person is. And so being led into that world, and it's not like they have a total gatekeeping mentality, but a lot of people ask you to climb. So it's a stamp of approval to say oh man, these guys want to climb with me.
I think it feels like gatekeeping when before you break through and talk to the people, but it's, for the most part, everyone's quite willing to talk and willing to engage.
Yeah, but willing to talk and willing to engage and willing to rope up on something where you guys are really depending on each other is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And privately, I'm sure Ian could tell us, about a bunch of guys over the years that he climbed with once, and that was good enough. And it may not have been any specific thing, but, it's just it didn't click, or we didn't sort of have the same attitude or the right attitude to be on these mountains together. And that's just about being partners, but you've come into, I heard things like the secret weapon, that's Alik Berg is someone who, this might embarrass you, but it's you're in this position now where other people feel privileged to climb with you. What do you think your qualities are that have brought you to that status for a lot of people that you formerly really respected yourself when they didn't even know you?
Yeah, I don't know.
I know this is a hard one for a guy like you. What do you bring to the partnership? That's as simple as it is. Because you think about it ahead of time, I'm sure.
We used to always joke that if you have a mixed team and whatever, international trip, the person from the Rockies always is like the loose rock specialist and has to do all the climb all the choss, and the American gets to climb all the splitter hand cracks. It's just like, it's totally offensive and awful, right? Like, so apparently that's what I bring to the table, but it's not what I want.
Right.
You know, like, I just want to climb nice pitches too. No, I don't know. I mean, I think like at this point for this kind of like winter alpine stuff or whatever, like we're talking about for around here, it's like, it's just mileage, right? If I'm like going climbing with somebody who's, you know, been doing that stuff for 3 years and I've been doing it for 10, then like, you know, there's just going to be a bit more competency, confidence, whatever on the medium. Like, I think that's all it really is, right? Like, I'm not actually like a particularly strong climber, right? Like, if I go climbing with someone like Quentin, like he's way stronger, like he's the person to lead the hard pitch, or like climbing with Raphael, like he's a way better mixed climber than me. But, you know, I can lead the rappels all night and like make, you know, like find anchors in like ridiculous places or whatever, right? And there's just a tons of other skills like that just become relevant on big alpine routes, right?
Let me put it a little bit differently. Because I think that like a person's skills are a super important part of a partnership in the mountains like you guys are doing. But then it's also, again, like you also have to click and you also have to trust each other. So let me ask you this. So the first few times or one of the first few times you get what I like to say called up to the big leagues, right? You're like, oh, these guys who I absolutely have made my heroes over the last, 10 years of my climbing career have asked me to go do this great big route with them. And, the night before you're like, well, what do I need to do on this thing to make sure that I back these guys up other than not falling and climbing? Like, do you bring a work ethic? Do you bring a vibe? Do you like make sure that what are you thinking about as far as like, how am I going to hold up my end of the partnership?
God, I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, like the picture you're painting is like, it basically describes like the first trip to Pakistan with Raf.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I was asking him to go. He didn't call me up.
Well, yeah. No, I'm saying like theoretically.
And for me, it was more like, oh, wow. And it was like with Ian too. It was kind of like, Ian didn't end up going, but it was sort of like I asked, like,
and they
do you
said
guys
yes.
want to go? And they said yes. And I was just like, wow, they want to go, like.
So same kind of scenario.
But I was just being like, oh, well, I'll just like try and get as fit as I can and then like get as much mileage as possible. Just like be as solid as I can be. Like, and on for that season too, I was like climbed a ton with Raf that winter, and we did a bunch of alpine climbing together in the Rockies, and I think that goes a long ways too. Like you're saying, just to build a partnership and just like understand how you work well with them, and like who, what qualities each person brings, like where one person shines and where, you kind of learn to know the person, like when it's time to like step up, when it's time to shut up, when it's, like, I don't know how that really like factors into like climbing skill sets. That's just like personalities and, expedition partner dynamics.
You're living, my phrase on this thing is best day ever's, like one best day ever after another in Yosemite, probably thinking at some points like, I will never leave here. I will always come back to Yosemite.
Oh yeah.
And then you go to somewhere else and it's like Indian Creek or something. You're like, this is the best day ever. I will never leave here. I will always be here.
I went through that phase too. Yeah.
Right. But so what is it like that you could have stayed that person. You could have been this guy that bails the winners in rock climbs. Like, what is it about that alpine experience? Because it's so complex.
Yeah, totally.
It's so very egotistical in a way. It's like you look up at these mountains that we can actually almost see from this hotel room and think to yourself, I can climb up there. Not only can I climb up there, but I can do it in the harshest sort of conditions in the dead of winter. And I'm going to suffer. There's all these things that go into this mentality of alpine climbing that makes it this kind of witch's brew of motivations. What is it for you that seems to be your peak experience that you want out of climbing in general?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you also, I'm sure, occasionally enjoy a nice hand crack in the sun, but it ain't the thing that's like,
it's not the full. Yeah, it's no, the complexity of alpine climbing is what draws me to it for sure. And in the same way, the complexity of like a spicy hard trad route, single pitch thing or whatever is way more interesting to me than a sport climber or climbing in the gym or something, right? And like I think that's also what attracted me to big wall climbing in a way, right? It was kind of like it was a progression from like top roping at the crag to like climbing multi pitches to Squamish, and Squamish to climbing El Cap with 7 days worth of shit, and that all built and led to El Cap, and that complexity of dealing with all the logistics, moving all the freight up the hill, aid climbing, trickery, like all that was super interesting and kept me engaged and kept me interested. And I think, I never mastered it or something, but at some point it became like routine, I guess. And alpine climbing was sort of the next piece of the puzzle. Like, I guess at that point, winter climbing was the next piece of the puzzle that wasn't there, right? And then once I adding winter and mixed climbing, putting it all together into climbing big mountains, like that's sort of the ultimate of like utilizing all of the skills that I've attempted to master or whatever over my whole life, into one, distill it all into one big mission or whatever, right? Like that's the most motivating thing I can think of to do with all that climbing skill or background, right?
We joked that you basically like pulled up the stakes of Yosemite big wall climbing with the booze and the drugs and everything and moved it to the bugs. And that type of big wall climbing, especially in the era you were doing it and previously, involved that like hedonism aspect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the stories of climbing El Cap always came with, and then they brought like 58 beers in a haul bag or whatever, kind of a thing. That all went away in terms of like what you're doing alpine climbing, and you threw in this, like I just mentioned, suffering. It's part of the game, whether it's altitude. I mean, nobody can go to 7,000 meters or 6,000 meters or whatever and not know they're going to suffer at least a little bit. What do you do? How are you with the pain cave? I mean, is it something that you can do?
It's just another complexity, right?
Right.
Like, it's the same thing with winter climbing, altitude or winter climbing, where it's like when you do it for the first time, it's just awful, right? You go ice climbing, you're like, you get the barfies, your hands are cold the whole time. It's just misery. And then you do it again, it gets a little better. You do it again, a little better, and then at this stage for me, if I like a normal routine day of ice climbing, winter climbing, it's not unpleasant. Like there's no suffering, right? It's like apart from like having to get up early or whatever, like that's the hard part for me now, right? And it's the same thing with like altitude. It's like altitude is maybe a little different. Like acclimatizing is always kind of painful and shitty, but the more you do it, the better you get at it, and you figure out how to go through that process with the least amount of suffering, and then it just makes the next trip better and easier. It makes that element of the whole complex trip, less painful, less of a burden, right? So you can actually focus on the hard climb or all the other complexities of the logistics of. But I mean, to be fair, I haven't done that much climbing at altitude. I've never climbed on like 7,000 or 8,000 meter peaks, or at least not to the tops of them. So I can't really like actually speak from experience of like climbing at that altitude. Maybe it is just awful. But I suspect that it still becomes just a challenging problem to solve, right? Like an intriguing problem to solve that you can't quite outsmart, but you can learn tactics to make it less awful, and then that is satisfying in a way, right?
So what about you mentioned
maybe even fun?
Yeah,
I mean, not just less awful.
Less awful, approaching fun.
I mean, really, it's just the acclimatization process that's kind of pain, right? Like the actual climbing at altitude isn't awful once acclimatized, right? It's just slow.
Okay, I'll take your word for it, because I'm never going to find out. A couple other things about progression, and you mentioned earlier that part of your attitude is that you do build a foundation, you do volume, you kind of feel like you don't necessarily always leap ahead. And you mentioned that right in there, you said something about like it's sort of like you start to learn about risk, and that you feel like that kind of progression thing helps lower that for you. Are you like, I mean, what is your attitude towards risk? I always have to, I ask a lot of climbers this, not just alpine climbers, but it's obviously a bigger deal in these complex situations.
Totally.
It's the complexity creates problems which add to the risk. So
yeah.
How do you feel like you sit in that world of the spectrum of the risk averse to the hothead, go for it guy? Where are you in that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the middle, like trying to thread the needle like everyone else, right? Or so I like to think, right? I'm sure that I'm more risk averse now than I used to be, but I think that threading that needle and like finding ways to mitigate that risk in a reasonable way while still getting up the things is, again, it's like part of the allure of that kind of complex climbing. Like if it had no risk, it would be too simple, right? Like it wouldn't be as interesting. But for sure, like in terms of like high level alpinism, like type risk taking, I think I'm pretty risk averse. Like I'm pretty uninterested in climbing under seracs, and I'm pretty, like climbing in the Rockies here. I'm pretty happy to just leave things for another day with avalanche conditions and stuff. It's easier to do here, to be fair, right? Like when you're at home, it's really easy to take the conservative option when you're thinking about whether conditions are good enough or not.
Versus the pressure of having spent the money,
being on an expedition,
and have the time, and we got the permits.
So that's a whole other type of like, risk analysis of like figuring out what's reasonable or what's not. But I think in general, I've always taken an attitude of, you can like reduce risk with knowledge, skill, good decisions, all that shit. Like that's obviously what we're all trying to do. And then there's a certain amount of risk that you just cannot eliminate or reduce significantly with good decisions, basically. And that just comes down to exposure time, right? So the more days you spend out in the risky medium, the more likely you're going to get the unlucky, so to speak, outcome where you may have made good decisions, but you still have a bad outcome. So I think more so these days than when I was younger, I try to make the big days count, the big alpine routes in the Rockies or on expeditions. And if conditions are just good enough, I'm pretty happy to leave it for another day. And also just like picking objectives that are meaningful, right? In terms of for the big kind of like times where you have like a lot of objective hazard, it's like I don't want to spend a bunch of days in a winter in some big gully under cornices, Like sure, you can pick the day when the cornices are slightly more stable because it's colder or time of year or whatever. But you have no control over when they're coming down. If you're spending all day in some big gully with ring of cornices above it, so you just do less of those days. But that's the kind of climbing I like, so I want those days, so I try and make them good ones, right? So be willing to bail when conditions aren't quite right, and pick objectives that are like meaningful or get you stoked.
Yeah, it's kind of like the sort of bucket theory. You can kind of like use some of that luck from your luck bucket, but don't overdo it.
I think it's really applicable in the Rockies with the snowpack here.
Right.
Especially like with winter alpine climbing or skiing. Skiing's a big one, right? Where, we definitely like, a lot of people here spend a lot of time skiing on a fairly questionable snowpack and have no bad outcomes. So, but eventually it happens, right? And, No, it doesn't mean you should go skiing less, but
Right.
I don't know. It's a tough one, but I think it does probably reduce the number of days I go skiing, just because I feel like it's, to some degree, it's something I just can't totally control. But yeah, I mean, you can go down that road pretty deep too and say you should just not go climbing.
Right. Yeah, totally. So I have a bunch of mountains written down here, some of whose names I can't probably pronounce, these Peruvian ones, some in Pakistan, some in Nepal that I could start asking you about. But I'm going to put it this way. Tell me about a recent, like in the last 5 years, or you can go further back if you need to, but of a perfect expedition that went outside of the Rockies to somewhere that, not that it was perfect, because they're never perfect, but one that like you're like, that went as well as I had hoped.
Yeah. It's funny because I've had like hardly any perfect or like good expeditions. Like most of the expeditions have been rather frustrating with logistics and weather and blah, blah, blah. And just like not getting, not actually getting on the mountain. But we can talk about Peru. Those have always been good. The weather's always good there.
Let's talk about Peru.
Yeah. I mean, the last trip to Peru with Quentin was pretty close to what you're describing. I guess it's like, it's not like it's not a story that people haven't heard about, but it is like a cool example of like, where shit just clicks and it all happens. So yeah, that was our second trip to Peru. First trip to Peru together was like, I think both of our first time at altitude, and it was like, kind of cutting our teeth on that type of climbing. And then this would have been maybe 4 years later or something. So definitely like both had a lot more experience and we're coming at it with a little more wisdom or age or whatever, like a little more patience, let's say. Right. Yeah. I mean, we went with a pretty open mind to Girishanka with this, basically just like, wanting to climb this beautiful peak and kind of being like, well, like there's some unclimbed terrain on the left. We can go take a look. But like pretty open to climbing whatever made sense, but just interested in that peak because of how aesthetic it is, right? Like it's, anyone that sees the pictures, it's just like, it's a peak that's made for climbing, right? Like it's been climbed on a ton, although not summited very often, like probably summited less than 5 times or something. I don't know exactly, but somehow this one aspect has no roots on it. Like this entire, like there's a few ridges that converge onto this south aspect, and so there's like a totally independent line. And I was like, well, gotta try, right? What could go wrong? Not a very hard route in the grand scheme of things, but pretty committing. Like it would be really hard to reverse the lower part of the ridge. All snow climbing, there's no anchors, right? And I think we spent basically 3 full days, dawn till dusk, almost always simul climbing, and just like having that really ideal synergy between partners, right? Like the kind of synergy that we probably didn't quite have on the first trip to Peru, but 5 years later or whatever, we did. You're simul climbing and when you need a belay, or when it's, if you're leading, when it's time to, you don't have to talk, right? Like there's just there's a lot of sort of unspoken communication, understanding, and, the team kind of moves as one, right? And you just don't get that often, right? And then just, the route just came together perfectly. All the question marks solved themselves, or we figured them out or whatever. The bivvies all just miraculously appeared, and the weather didn't come in, and yeah, amazing, right? Like, so it was just kind of what you're going for, right? It takes a lot of failed attempts before you get those ones where everything lines up.
And it was recognized by the PLA, right? That one was?
Yeah.
What's the name of the route? The
Reno Hongo.
Reno Hongo, yeah.
The Mushroom Kingdom. It's like a Super Mario reference, basically. Yeah, it's funny the PLA thing. It's like traditionally we view it as being like the best alpine climb of the season. Like that's how it traditionally was, right? They would like have a short list, and then they would pick the number one, and you get your kind of gold medal. And I think that organization has sort of moved a little bit away from like picking sort of the hardest or the most badass route and then like singling it out. Because I think that's sort of a little bit out of the spirit of climbing a little bit, because it's not really that, I don't know, for me, it's not that competitive, right? And so I think a lot of people still view the PLAs as being that, as like a recognition of the best climb of the year or something. And the way they do it now, like, you know, like that year there was 3 climbs that went, and one of them for sure was the best climb of the year. You know, not ours, right? But
which one?
The Pumari Quiche.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. So like, so that's like the traditional, like,
right.
Well, this is the most badass new route done in the Greater Ranges this year, so
right,
we got to celebrate this,
yeah.
Right? But then the other ones were kind of, there's 2 others, and like us and I can't remember the name of the peak, but Paul Ramsden and Tim Miller, the route they climbed in Nepal, both kind of like, it's like they picked those 2 more about because of the story, right, and the like the partnership and the style and stuff like that, right? But for sure there was other harder routes that got climbed in the Greater Ranges that year. So it's like, yeah, there's like lots of criticism for the PLAs, but that's like probably reasonable. And as an entity, like it's not perfect. And I would have been more critical of it in the past, but actually after going, I thought it was kind of it's actually a cool little celebration of just sort of the spirit of alpine climbing. And it ends up just being this gathering of climbers from around the world, kind of like the Banff Fest, right? Which has a ton of value of like just bringing people together from the greater community, a chance to just, you know, to meet people from all over the world that are doing the same kind of, like, have the same interests, have the same drive, and that otherwise you just interact with over Instagram or something, right?
It's interesting though, because it's like I've found, and maybe this is the same sort of for European continental kind of climbers, but I feel like most of the North American climbers that I've met are, at least beforehand, are pretty ambivalent about it. Kind of like that, like, well, yeah, it's cool, but
about the PLA,
the PLA, you know. And I'm talking,
it is a very Eurocentric thing, and that's maybe a bit of a problem with it as a global alpine climbing festival or whatever. Like, it would benefit a lot from, like, as it travels now. It used to, I think, always be in Chamonix,
right? And
now, you know,
well, it's interesting because I think that's would help and everything else, but there's this rootsy thing in North American climbing, and I think it actually has to do with even the way you learned to climb, is that this sort of attitude was brought here, and it has come with a lot of, like, you don't boast about your climbing, and I think that's still, you can say yes or no, but it still feels like that up here within the scene that you're in, that, like, you know, if someone gets too sort of big for their britches, they get a little bit of a, you know, like a comeuppance up here.
You think that's specific to the Rockies scene?
I think it's
more prevalent here.
I think it's the legacy is stronger
and in the UK?
here. Yeah,
yeah.
The legacy is still stronger here.
Sure.
But it's a legacy that, you know, the old Yosemite guys had and everything else, and we kind of forget it because we live in this time of over self promotion. But I think that's part of the deal with the PLAs, is that attitude you just had of, like, well, okay, so they said this was the hardest, but what about that thing? And I know this guy
it's a pointless debate, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It's not, you can't do those. Yeah, it's not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
It's like,
most of the people I know have gone or whatever, accepted it. Some have just blown it off, or like, or were planning on it and then got tucked into it. Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah,
you know, Hayden tells a story about, like, saving Doug Scott's life because they were on the stage and the lights went down, and Doug, in his old age, he's passed now, but started walking towards the orchestra pit thinking it was the exit off the stage. And, like, at the last second, Hayden's like, oh man, and then I like grabbed him and turned him at the last second. He would have fallen like 12 feet into the orchestra pit. So he has all these great stories, but it's just an interesting thing because I think it's awesome and you should take pride in it in the end, but it's also, like, kind of cool to be like, yeah, it didn't really matter, we did the climb for ourselves, which is also true. Like, you can be both things. You can be like, wow, we got recognized and that's awesome, but we also didn't go there to be recognized, and that's awesome too.
I don't think that the recognition or being chosen, like, you know, as much as it's flattering because it's like the jury is like all people I really respect, it did not add to the thing at all. It's not like, it didn't make the climb any more special, right? Like,
right.
it would have been just like, so what, you know, all the whatever I was just describing to you about how great that climb was, that all still,
right.
I would have said that before they chose us. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, but it's kind of, it's a nice feeling that you know, what for us was a special climb and, you know, flowed really well and had all of those attributes, apparently appeared to, from the outside, to also be like, you know, a quote unquote good climb, right? Like, and you know, I think the people that are on that jury, they could see that there was something about that climb that was special, and not because it was hard, right? Like, I know not that it was easy, but you know, it's not cutting edge difficulty or whatever, but it was like, you know, it was in the spirit of good, clean, good style alpine climbing, right?
And then the whole experience was ruined when you were digitally erased from the summit.
Especially while I was there. No, of course not.
Suddenly you were gone. You were like, I've been digitized, help.
No, honestly, like the summit experience was incredible. And it was like one of the best parts of the story, the memory, the whole experience that we just talked about was like popping over that cornice and seeing Josh on the summit. Like, it was amazing. You know,
yeah, I mean, it's like
it's just totally crazy.
It's like a meteor hitting. You know, it's like the chances of it are somewhat slim. And
like, we were all so fucking psyched. It was just wild.
Which is why I don't know why they couldn't have left it in the film.
Yeah,
but
it's complicated. That's another topic.
I know.
And you know,
I had to get a little shot.
They have to make the decisions they have to make. It's fine. But it, you know, But honestly, like other than that, it was kind of cool. Like the fact that they were making a film there and they had this like big production team, it like didn't actually affect us at all, right? Other than like we were affected by, you know, being able to follow Josh and Vince's tracks and use some of their wrap anchors.
Yeah, because you went down that side.
We went down their route. But other than that, like, I mean, we just had people to hang out with in base camp. It was great. So it was like overall a super positive experience being there with those guys, with everyone, right? It was like, some of them were friends before the trip and they're all friends now. And
yeah, those guys are all right.
Yeah. They're all pretty great.
You know, I had that comment about sort of these generations, each one standing on the shoulders of the other, all that sort of stuff that we say. But you have a really interesting situations here in Canmore, you know, where these people are around. You're now friends with them. I mean, all the way up to, thank God, Barry's still around, you know, despite almost dying just a couple years ago when he fell down the stairs, which is in the podcast we did up here last year. But he's still here. His memories are still there. He's this just integral and beautiful part of the community here, all the way down to, you know, through the guys we talked about that you were mentored by. Now you're 37. You did make a little small comment about like trying to kind of move into that position a little bit. And I think as climbers, a lot of climbers are, you know, they're on fire through their 20s and just unstoppable. You had seems like a decade of just like, I mean, it's ongoing, but like really hammering. I think a lot of climbers like that arrive in this place almost like, wait, oh my God, I'm sort of like the old guy. I'm sort of getting to be that dude, right? And I know because people emailing me, because what your partner said about you, you know, calling you the secret weapon. They said it's almost cheating when you have Alik on your team, and you are in this position where you have a generation of younger climbers that are like, I need to know about that guy, or who is that dude? I got two questions there. Like, how does that sort of make you feel? And then, you know, if you do have something that you'd want to tell a younger version of yourself, or one of these guys that are entering this world that you dove into 15, 16, 17 years ago so hard. So first question is like, how does that make you feel? Like you're like a guy, and your humility also precedes you. You know, I'm surprised you agreed to do this, to be honest with you. And I appreciate it. Yeah, I very much appreciate it. You're having, you know, you don't like to talk about yourself, but I'm making you do it. It's part of the fucking deal.
Yeah.
Once you said yes, that was your mistake. But anyway, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, definitely feeling more like that lately. And yeah, well, I've definitely benefited so much over the years from the people that have taken the time to pass on their knowledge to me over the years. And that goes like, you know, we talked about it in the Rockies context, but it goes all the way back, right? It's like my dad teaching me stuff. It's going to Squamish and climbing with like American dirt bags, and they were showing me like different ways of doing things, right? It's just it's a constant thing. But for sure, I think that there's like, I'm in a unique position in a way in the Rockies of having done a ton of this weird winter alpine stuff that is pretty dangerous. And yeah, no, I do want to make more of an effort to make sure that I'm accessible to people, I guess, to ask questions, right? To go climbing, learn from, whatever. And it's not just young climbers, it's like visiting climbers too, right? Like the snowpack here is super weird, right? Like if you're traveling to the Rockies to go, you know, climb winter alpine routes and you've just stepped off the plane, like a bit of local knowledge is going to go a long ways to just making it safer. So I think that I am kind of like falling into a bit of that role over the last 2 years. And I think like, because I've always been a little bit reclusive maybe, or at least not present online, it sort of makes me appear to be not that accessible. Maybe you experience that too. and it's like in my nature to not necessarily put myself out there. I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't want the spotlight or whatever.
His chair is sweat drenched right now, people, by the way. Just after an hour and a half of this.
But on like the personal level, it's like I do want to make those connections, and sort of like coming to the Banff Fest, like doing this interview, talking to people that wouldn't otherwise hear from me through this medium or just through interacting with people here. I think that's something that I've neglected over the last, really most of my life, right? Because I've never really made too much of an effort to share everything online and do the whole self-promotion thing.
Well, and noticeably, you're not like a professional climber sponsored type of dude. I don't know if you have minor sponsorships, but you found a different life balance.
There's no like professional obligation to, so there's no nudge, and it's just not in my nature to go out of my way to tell everyone or to even to share in general. Because we talked about the sort of like British sensibility or whatever of not boasting. That's sort of the natural way for me to be. But it means that I'm not present online, and that's how people interact these days, kids these days. and so it takes like a more deliberate effort for me, basically, right?
There can be this ambivalence, and I heard a little bit from Barry too, of this thing of sort of being an inspiration. I've heard it from like Conrad Anker as well, being this inspiration for people to go get after it. And yet, as we get older and we've dealt with the risks and we've been through the losses, and I say we because I'm included in this. There's like this but what should I encourage these people to do? Because I want them to have this experience that I had. This like everything is possible. The mountains are freedom.
Yeah. It's so complicated.
Yeah, so
the we talk so much about like mitigating risk and trying to make it safe, and trying to not go when the avalanche hazard is too high and so on. But at some point, if there's no risk, it's like
the risk is the thing.
The risk is the thing.
Yeah.
And so there's a balance there of kind of being cautious enough to keep yourself alive, but also when you're young and keen, like you should go for it, right? Like you should push the boat out once in a while, right? And so that it's like there's a balance, I think, from the mentor role or whatever to sort of encourage that as well, right? It can kind of be you can overemphasize it in both directions, right? You can be overstoked, you can be kind of like overly cautious, and really like all the progression or whatever that happens in this medium is when people they go a little farther than they thought they would have been able to.
So another thing Barry talked about is like we got into the dark part of it all, the obsession, the risk, the losing partners. And we've talked about that a little bit here. But what is for you, you've been in the game now your whole life, 3 years old. 35 years of climbing, even though you're only 37 or 34 years of climbing. Like, what has been the ultimate reward that just keeps you coming back to it?
The ultimate reward doesn't end up being the individual good climbs, like the Girishanka climb or whatever, things like that were, that are great experiences, but it's the people you get to share them with, and it's the places you get to go. And then not necessarily just world travel, but even just living in the Rockies and being able to, just drive up the parkway and park somewhere on the side of the road and just walk into the forest with a buddy and just traverse some ridgeline for a week, camp in the meadows and, hide under the tarp in the rain and just have these magic experiences in the mountains. Like being able to do that for a lifetime is it's just it's a privilege and a joy. And yeah, I can't really think of a better way to spend your life, right? And it all comes from climbing, right? So
all right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Alik for doing that. Did a great job, don't you think? I felt like giving him a hug afterwards. I think I might have. The other thing about Alik is he showed up in my room with the entire kit to make me an AeroPress, including the stove. Sorry, Banff Center. But yeah, we had an open flame in our room. Anyhow, yeah, he brewed me up before the podcast. I like that kind of thing. That was awesome. So, he does have an Instagram, Alik Berg, I think, something like that. Follow him or don't, he doesn't care. However, it would be a way to reach out to him if you are in Canmore, if you are looking for conditions or advice about climbing up there. I think he's willing to talk to you about that. Nothing to lose. Hit him up. See what happens. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. I think we're in the middle of it right now as I'm recording this. Happy Festivus for those who celebrate, and Happy New Year. See you in 2026. I'm going to drop another special one from Banff right around the new year. So look forward to that. And after the stockings are hung from the chimney with care, don't forget to check your knots. Let's double down on that in 2026, people.
What did you say? What do you look so shocked for, man? Fat bastard does this all the time. He thinks just because you don't say anything, it'll have some huge impact when he does open his fucking mouth.
Jesus Christ, why don't you shut up? Was yapping all the time. Give me a fucking headache. I went through something like what you're talking about a couple of years ago, this chick named Amy.
When?
A couple of years ago.
But she live in Canada or something? Why don't I remember this?
Bitch, what you don't know about me, I could just about squeeze in the Grand fucking Canyon. Did you know I always wanted to be a dancer in Vegas? Huh? But you didn't even know that shit, did you?